And suddenly the water drains out of the cove. And we look at each other and we're like, oh no. And wave sets came in and basically smashed me up against, we both turned to start to go. And he's an incredible swimmer. So he's like a dolphin, like, psst. And I'm like back in the cove being like, wait for me. And then boom.
Hey there, and welcome to the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. This is part 2 of my interview with David Moscow. Yes, he wrote this new book titled From Scratch. And like I said in the last video, part 1 video, as I said, I love the subtitle, Adventures in Harvesting, Hunting, Fishing, and Foraging on a Fragile Planet. If you've watched part 1, you know that, wow, we connected, and boy, did he tell some awesome stories.
You already know. My passion and my mission to help you unleash your greatness within. My heart goes out to the underdogs that's on their way. If you think you can go from good to great, okay, let's motivate. GreatnessWithin.com. DJ Hoisington. GreatnessWithin.com.
In this portion, or part 2 of this interview, he gets into some of the stories around the world and the scary situations he's been in. And I just remind you, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, hey, do me a favor, subscribe and make sure you click that notification bell so that you're first to be notified when I come out with a new motivational message or another success interview. And if you've downloaded it from iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio, wherever podcasts can be downloaded from, at whatever platform you use, hey, thank you for being a part of my community. Okay, without any further ado, let's just continue this great interview with David Moscow.
Tell me about the story of making cheese in a cave. What did that look like? What was that like?
So the Barbosa Mountains are Sardinia is this island where you would think has a big seafood, that seafood would be the main staple, but actually it had been invaded so many times that people didn't really live on the coast. They moved back up into the mountains. So it was more like sheep, a culture around sheep and goats. And Europe for hundreds of years thought that the people in Sardinia were sort of barbarians and lazy. And this is an interesting thing. When we went there, we realized that it's one of the blue zones where people live over 100, a sizable part of the population.
Okay, yeah.
So the reasons that Europeans thought that they were barbarians and lazy are actually leading to the fact that they are some of the healthiest, longest lived people on the planet. There's no hustle and bustle. It's very low key. They stay friends with the people that they know their whole lives. And it's an interesting place because a lot of the blue zones, there is a difference between men and women. Like women still live a lot longer than men, but in Sardinia, it's not the case. They live the same length of time and it's longer than most humans. So why, right? Is it that the grandmas, people don't grow up far from their grandparents? That's one of the theories about it. Another theory is that the food that they ate, very Mediterranean diet, that they do live in mountains. So there is some relationship to longevity with what is the angle that takes you to walk up to your village, right? And so all of these things relate to it. And Sardinia just happens to be a place that it kind of fulfills this. There are some people who say that this is just if we unpeel the onion one more time, some people say it's a marketing thing and it's actually not as real as people say. But that argument's happening right now. Anyway, so we're there in Sardinia. There was a hermit who lives in the mountains. He had a trauma. His brother had died. They had been sheep herders. His brother had died, and he basically was like, I'm checking out. My dad in his old town talked about a cave in these mountains. I'm going to go live in the cave with my goats. And then, so he did. He'd been there 10 years. It just happens to make some of the most amazing cheese in Sardinia that the top Michelin star chefs want. So, we went searching for him, and long drive out to the middle of nowhere, long hike up to this cave. And he's built an add-on to the cave, which is kind of like his little, so there's like a large cave where all the goats and sheep are. And then there's a little smaller cave right next to it that he's put the front of a house on, and a little chimney that he can cook inside of it. And he's been living there by himself since his brother died. And we went up there, and I think that was the first time I ever milked goats and sheep. And we made ricotta, which is, you cook it twice. The first thing that we made was a round of goat cheese, and then we took that out to dry, and what was left we reheated, and the curding is basically the ricotta that comes after. And then I sat up there, and we shared a beer, and he talked about, I asked him if he was ever going to move down, and he said, look, I'm getting old and it's lonely, but I don't know. So we left on a very sort of,
and he's up there all by himself.
Yeah. I mean, he gets people to come through to purchase the cheese, and he made an amazing goat. He butchered a goat and has this outdoor oven, and he just put it on a stake, leaned it up against the cave wall, lit coal underneath it, and that was when we first started. And then 2.5 hours later, that goat was done, and it was just bananas. Amazing. Like,
yeah, totally.
Sharing it with him, with the crew, like, these are moments that go back to sort of eating with friends and family and rituals. And, those are times when we'll always remember it, except for me, who thinks that it was in Croatia.
No,
it was in
you
Sardinia.
Traveled so many places. I mean, your stories in the book. I mean, every chapter is another story. And what I love about it is not only is every chapter in the book a story, you also tie in a lot of the history and the I didn't even say geopolitics. Like when you talk about the South China Sea, you go through several pages of kind of giving people a better understanding of what's really going on there. Because I remember when I lived in Taiwan, they do eat a lot of fish in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Here's an interesting, as I was researching, I was thinking, when I was in Taiwan, I was working out in this small little town on the beach, a couple hours, 3 hours maybe away from Taipei. And I remember walking down these long streets, and there'd be these warehouses and rice paddies everywhere. And one summer day, I noticed that on this asphalt or concrete, I can't remember. I'll have to pull up a picture because I have old pictures of these. I'll have to put it on the final version of this podcast. But they just had all the rice laying out, baking in the sun. And I started thinking, that's the rice I want. I don't want the industrialized, rice, even though I love rice and I eat rice all the time. I want that. It was very simple. And I don't know if they shipped that out and it went around the world, or if it just served the community or whatever, but just rice all over the ground. And I asked the gentlemen that were working there, no, we just let the sun do its work. And I was just like, wow.
You got it right there. You got it. You saw it. Like that. There's such an amazing thing about looking at something done authentically by people who've been doing it for so long and are experts at it, and then getting to try it. Right. And that goes back to sort of like when you brought up the idea about hard work and how that makes you happy.
Happy.
When you start to make food, whether it's planting or gardening or harvesting, whatever, your body, your mind starts to click. Oh, I'm going to eat this. Yeah. I'm going to eat this later. Your hunger starts to happen. Things start to taste better. Like, and then when you finally reach the end of it, You know everything that's gone in there. You know all the flavors, right? There's so many things that we eat and we're like, oh, that tasted good, but you have no clue why.
Totally.
Right here, you are connecting like the matrix of all the flavors, and you understand what it is, and you are so hungry for it and so ready for it that there is not a better tasting meal than one that you have made from the start. Like,
I believe
especially
that.
when there's an amazing chef telling you how to cook at the end, which is one of the things we also have in the book. We have these great recipes at the end of the book from a lot of the chefs that we went around the world and made meals with. Their personal favorites that they lent to the book.
What was when you're out sourcing for food, foraging for food, did you share maybe a time that kind of freaked you out or was scary as you were? I did see a video where you had to jump a fence to pick some cherries.
Well, that was just basic thievery.
Okay. But give us something where it was kind of crazy.
Wow. Okay. So there were a couple of, I mean, every episode has something that's like out of my comfort zone because I'm a city kid, right? So all of this is dangerous on some level. Like climbing a freaking palm tree in the Philippines for coconuts is like, why, right? And your producers are underneath you, like with the pitchfork, go higher. You're like, okay. But I was going for octopus in Sardinia. We were spearfishing, and it was really rough that day. We were with this amazing guy, Giuseppe, who was a championship free diver. Thank goodness. So we were unable to get octopus because it was too, there was a lot of soil runoff because we were right along the edge of the island. And so we did a pivot. He wanted to be done for the day. He was like, look, this is dangerous right now. I don't want you in the water. Because he also had to watch my cameraman as well. And so we pivoted to these sea anemones called, oh my God, they're sea tomatoes is the sort of colloquial. I forget what the scientific name is. And they look like little red cherry tomatoes. And they're sea anemones that attach themselves to the the water line.
Okay.
And people want them, so you got to go to places that are kind of hard to get to find them now, or else they'll just be like harvested. So we convinced Giuseppe to take me to this cove where they were at the water line where he knew, and he was like, but we can't bring the camera operator, you got a drone to film this.
So that's how they film.
So I just have to worry about you. And I was like, okay. And I was happy, I have the invincible TV host, book writer, nothing's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
He's looking, I should have remembered the look on his face because he was like not happy with the situation at all. So we go in and we're in this cove, and I've got this like little sort of fork thing, and I'm prying them off, and we're treading water because it's still deep. And suddenly the water drains out of the cove, and we look at each other and we're like, oh no. And wave sets came in and basically smashed me up against, we both turned to start to go, and he's an incredible swimmer, so he's like a dolphin, like, and I'm like back in the cove being like, wait for me. And then boom, and I got a ton of water in my snorkel, and it was one of those old snorkels that doesn't have like the blow out at the bottom, and I drank half the ocean. I hadn't taken off my weight belt from the octopus, so I went under. And suddenly pulls me up as I'm getting smashed. He took a deep breath and bulldozed me out of this cove. And I think the drone is like 2 minutes and 45 seconds of just terror, like so bad. Even at the very end, we're almost out of the cove. Like the boat is right there, and a wave goes boom. I'm like, oh, and my crew is like, yeah, that looked incredible. That's incredible TV. And I'm like, and me and Giuseppe, we have a separate boat that we're riding back on. It was a very quiet ride back because he knew and I knew, like,
your life was.
I almost died.
Yeah.
And then I got attacked by a swarm of bees in Kenya. We were harvesting with the Maasai, with a shaman, and they actually do a really cool thing. They, you know, a lot of the wild bees were sort of dying out because people were going and harvesting in the forest. And it was also a reason, like, sort of once people were getting honey from the forest, they were also sort of illegally taking trees and cutting lumber down, and illegal lumber in Kenya is a real issue. And so the shaman, the leaders basically started building these Kenyan designed beehives, which are different than US beehives. And they use them around cornfields because elephants don't really like bees. So it protects the cornfield and the community can have honey. And so we go down there, and there's me, Pamwat, who's the main leader of this area, and then one of his other wise, like, elders, and there's 2 bee suits, and they're putting the bee suits on, and I'm looking around like, where's my bee suit?
Yeah, that's what
I need a bee suit. Yeah. And all I had was like this rain jacket, and so like I cinched up the jacket, so it was like I was looking out of here, and they have this mushroom that they light on fire, which calms the bees down. But I don't think it calmed the bees down well enough, because I was in there and it suddenly bop, 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 and chased me. I ran to a car. They had a car waiting, because African bees aren't that much different. You know, there's no, like, sting wise, it's the same sting. The only difference is they'll send about 10 times the amount of bees after you, and they'll chase you about a mile further than American bees. So they had this boat. I jump. They have a car. I jump in the car, close the door, and there's 3 bees in there with me. So then I hop out of the car, run down and so they picked these things out of my forehead, and my face blew up, super big. Yeah. And the next day, I had a interview with a very, very famous anthropologist, paleoanthropologist, Richard Leakey. And so I show up for my interview, and he's looking at me. And this side of my face is like a Klingon, like, and we have it on. They just videoed me over the shoulder talking to him, and he has this look of like bizarre, like, what is this guy doing? Yeah. So that was tough. Oh,
that's cool. Wow.
There was another near-death experience. Oh, in that same journey, we were looking for this root that tastes like vanilla bean. It's the root of a plant in the highlands in Kenya, and there's no scientific name for it because nobody has really discovered it. The chef got it from the shaman, and he uses it in creme brulee, and it's, oh my gosh, and it tastes like vanilla with a little cinnamon to it. And as we're looking for this plant, we are coming upon buffalo poop, like cow pies of buffalo. And buffalo and hippo kill the most people in Africa than any other animal. They're the most dangerous animal. Oh, wow. Okay. And so as we're hiking, the buffalo poop is coming closer and closer. It's like a horror movie. It's like, guys, and the elders have long buffalo spears, like, to protect themselves. And so that was surreal. But yeah, there's a lot of fun, a lot of like great stories, and you know, I highly recommend everybody go out. Well, yeah, definitely read the book.
Make sure you get the book for sure.
But I think go out and make, you know, harvesting, fishing, foraging for something a part of your ritual, a part of your family ritual, kind of like what you did with the chickens, right? And it doesn't have to be chickens. It could be mushrooming, right? There are countries all over. I mean, the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. I went and harvested mushrooms up around where you are. And it was a really neat thing. The Travis, the mushroomer, he said to me, he's like, you know, when fall comes here, a lot of people get depressed. The rain comes, it's cold and wet. And he said, for me, it's so exciting because mushrooms are coming. And and it changes. He goes out there and he mushrooms, and everyone around him is like, I don't want to go outside. And he's like, this rocks. And yeah. So
not far from where we live, there's this big, I don't know how many acres, maybe 20 acres of woods and trails. And in the fall time, I always see people with bags, and I always run through there on my exercise run, and they just have bags and they're just collecting mushrooms. And I always wondered, is this a thing up here? I never noticed that really before. But Travis, I mean, I think I read in the book, once you try something to the effect, correct me if I'm wrong here, once you eat the right kind of mushroom or whatever else, you never want to go back, or it's like it's surreal or something.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. There's a in the Pacific Northwest, there's a Matsuyaki. There's a it's the most expensive mushroom in the world. And in Japan it's considered a delicacy. And the majority of the harvesting for that is in the Pacific Northwest. There's this whole sort of like world of mushroom hunters who live out in the woods during mushroom season, and they come back with these pounds of this mushroom, and then there's a bidding, like you bid under a tent with the lights. And there's a great book called Mushroom at the End of the World, which I highly recommend. Writer is Singh, and she talks specifically about this mushroom and the global industry that comes from, it's a very sort of like, what's the word that she uses? We think about food production as sterile and factory based, and this is people living in tents out of the woods that are at the beginning of one of the most important foods in Japan, and you just don't think of it that way. What was the word? Travis actually didn't like that I used it, but it's basically tenuous. It's a tenuous existence, and it's a tenuous type of food production, because you really are at the mercy of what the earth is going to give you, which doesn't happen a lot to us today, right? There's so much that we do to like keep the food consumption going. Right. But mushrooms don't listen that way.
Yeah, there are no seasons anymore. You can get grapes in the spring, you can get grapes in the summer, you can get it in the fall, get it in the winter. It's amazing.
Cherries, right?
And I read some statistic somewhere that the average vegetable or fruit that you eat is likely, well, I know this for a fact, it's last year's harvest, because I do consulting for a big company that ships all the food up to Alaska, and they tell me that the apples, for example, is last year's. They're frozen, and anyway.
Oh wow! So
a lot of the nutrients.
So they know they have a dependable amount of what they.
Yeah, they store it, and so that's interesting. I was hoping they had the biggest. This company I work for, that I consult with, they said this year was the biggest salmon run that they've had in over 10 years.
Amazing.
I think and when I
up by you.
Up by us. Yeah. So up in Alaska. But they ship all this fish down, and they said we are just blowing past all the records. So I was excited to think that when I went to Costco or I went somewhere to buy fish, that the price would go down, and the price has only gone up. It's just amazing. But that company did have me go up off the grid and do we've got some halibut, and we cooked that halibut that night. And what you're talking
about,
what I sense from your book, and I kind of out of a spiritual place, right? When I saw your book, it called out to me. And as I read your book, and then I watched some of the other interviews you did and some snippets of your show that you did prior to the book, I could feel a lot of love. And I wrote this down as a thought I was going to share in the opening. I said, I think your message has a lot to do with love. We are so in love with the things that we learn to love and those things that we honor. And the things that we honor, we tend to love. And I feel like your book and your positive influence is you're helping people see the relationship with food and culture. You give us a window into food culture and a connection to humanity. When Howard Schultz started Starbucks Coffee Company, it was about coffee, but really the vision of what he had was to create a community. It was about creating an environment where we could spend time with each other and we can enjoy kind of almost symbolically. And I think what you're really pulling out is this connection to understand what you're eating, and not only just understand it, but to seek better ways to eat the food, to source the food, to just be mindful and be humble, right? I sense I sense in you, sorry, I'm getting a little personal here, but I sense in your nature that you're a very confident guy. There's no question on that, but you're also humble. And I think you can be confident and humble. You are subservient to the greater whole to a degree. And I think your book and the work that you're doing now is pointing people into a more organic, whole body experience place. I don't know, any thoughts around any of that?
No, I think, man, I think you really, you got it. You got what we were trying to discuss. And there's a lot of layers in what you're saying. I think that I'm confident to know what I don't know, or to understand that I don't know a lot. And I think recognizing expertise is important. And there's so much of like, everyone's an expert, particularly on the internet, that real experts, you know, are degraded in some way. And making food, producing food, when you understand, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
And you are an incredible chef. You are an incredible, we went and harvested wheat in Italy with this group that harvests wheat like they have for the last 500 years. And you're using old sickles and you're using old tools, and you go out in the summer heat, and then you go to an old mill, and then you make pizza dough from this. And if without the help, without their knowledge that's been handed down, you know, through Italian culture for hundreds of years, I'd be lost. And you have to be able to give yourself to them in a way, which is hard for people to do, is, you know, to hand yourself over and say, okay, I'm going to listen to you because you know what you're talking
about. But there's goodness in that. There's something of beauty in being able to put the self aside to understand and to grow. Oh,
yes. And there's a double-edged thing that I have a tenant that I find. There's a really cool book called the Shop Class as Soulcraft. It's a Yale philosophy professor who also he owns a motorcycle repair shop right outside in New Haven, right next to the university. And he when there are people in our lives who can do stuff that we don't know how to do, that are important to us, that are necessary. So like a plumber or a mechanic or a food producer. He believes that people sometimes react negatively to that person because they have such power over us that we don't know how to deal with that, right? I can't fix this. I need someone to come in and fix this for me. And the next thing you know, that plumber is being made fun of culturally. And he says that's because of insecurities within ourselves, and that we don't know how to handle people who are experts, who can fix what we can't. And I think we see it with food producers, like people who go out in the sun and work hard and are able to bring food to keep us alive should be freaking looked up to. And instead, you know, so there's the double edged. Well,
Debbie Ford, who wrote the book The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, who was on Oprah many times before she passed away, she would always say the things that we criticize about other people are oftentimes a reflection of criticism that we have about ourselves.
Yeah.
Instead of just being confident and humble,
and learning to love those people. Love those people.
Love the people. Yes.
Recognize how incredible it is, you know, that for fishermen. They go out and put their lives on the line to keep us fed. Like, wow. When I heard that that was the most dangerous career in the world, I was like, oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. Transformative, you know? So yeah,
You're
I think
right on. You're right on, man. I sense the goodness in you. I got to your afterword in the book.
yeah,
Some of the things you reflect on in the afterword that you kind of learned from all of this in the end of the book. By the way, why don't we pause here real quick and say, hey, where can people get the book?
okay. My publisher is Permuted Press, but Simon and Schuster is distributing, and it's everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, your local small bookstore. Comes out October 25th. We're going to be in New York doing a sort of a big event on October 26th down at the Barnes and Nobles in Tribeca, and then we'll be back in LA November 11th at Book Soup. Selma Blair, who's also an author and an actress, is going to be not mediating. She's going to be moderating. She'll be moderating a talk at Book Soup, which is a really cool indie bookstore in LA. And then I'll be traveling around at different bookstores.
How can people connect with you? Is there a website that's probably a good landing place? For
there's a discoverfromscratch.com. That has a lot of stuff about the book and a lot of stuff about the show.
Perfect. We'll put that down here.
Instagram is a great place to find me, David Raphael Moscow, and From Scratch. And then we will be likely on a new platform come January. We are negotiating with somebody.
Oh, this is awesome.
If they raise their if the negotiation goes well, I think we'll be seasons 1 and 2, and a third season will be on. And then there is a spin-off. This is for the show. There's a spin-off that's From Scratch Home. So how a house is built. How do you I'll go harvest bamboo, make bamboo flooring. How do you make a faucet? I will mine iron, smelt steel, make a mold, and we'll be building.
My attorneys told me years ago when I started writing Swiss Family Robinson, they said, whatever you do, don't base it on the Disney version of Swiss Family Robinson. Make sure you go back to the original. So I bought 5 antique books from 1815, 1818.
So that's for copyright reasons?
Just to make sure, because all those books are in the public domain.
Yep.
And so I had to base my version off the original. And I noticed the names that Disney used for they called her Roberta, was actually Jenny, and there's different things that I learned through the process. But one of the things I learned in one of those earlier books was how in a cave, so you talk about building homes, right, in your next series.
Yep.
How in a cave they would use horsehair and some other things to create a carpet in the cave. This was written in 1818, and I wrote about that in my book because I found it so fascinating. So if you come, that'll be awesome if you come out with that series, just to see, especially if you can go to some of these places that people wouldn't think of, and some of the ingenuity that goes into home building, and just like you have with food.
I mean, that's the hope. The hope is to look past in the past, to find things that people still use, and then also things that are the future, right? Like see plastic countertops and all the stuff that people are working on today to help with climate change.
Hey, you met I know that you spent your summers oftentimes in Utah, I think, in Wyoming or something like that.
Utah, Montana.
Yeah, Montana, with cousins and so forth. And hey, you should do some. You don't have to do anything I say. I
love ideas. So this is the great thing about the show, about the food show and this other home show, is everyone's like, you know what restaurant you should go to.
Well, I was thinking, for sure. But I was thinking, think of the pioneers that came from the East over the Rocky Mountains.
My great grandpa, our family land, they homesteaded up around Canada.
I have my posterity, my family, anyway, heritage.
Are you
Yeah,
LDS?
I
No.
am LDS.
You are?
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
mom's LDS.
Oh, you're kidding me.
So all my
Oh,
cousins in Utah, they're all LDS.
Oh yeah,
Right,
my two sons are at BYU right now,
no
finishing their
way.
finance and accounting degrees.
So my mom is a Jack Mormon. She went to BYU.
I get it,
for
Jack.
2
Or
years
she went.
and didn't make it through. And
That's why you're such a cool guy. No,
we still get missionaries come to the door. They ring the door buzzer. We're like, come in, have dinner. And then pretty soon they're like, this is the strangest Mormon family we've ever met.
No, totally, dude. Well,
Yeah.
you're just a good guy that way. But oh yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of the journals we have as a family from our family from many decades ago who were going across the plains and the things they had to come up with and do. Maybe
Yeah,
even
the
one of those,
ingenuity.
the ingenuity that went into some of this stuff. Just amazing.
And it can't be denied in the face of everything that's going on and all the flashy colors and everything that gets shoved our way. You cannot deny the expertise that it takes to build something, to make food, to cook.
I worry that, so as I do consulting in the business world, there are many leaders concerned about the mass exodus of the people that have the skill and the know-how who are now coming to the age of retirement, and they're going to rely on a younger generation.
Right.
That didn't know why we did it that way and why we continue to do it that way and so forth. And I think of my mom, who just knew through growing up with the heritage and so forth that we had. She knows how to make soap. And I'm thinking, yeah, and the industrialized world that we live in is probably not that necessary to learn how to do that stuff. But that stuff, like you said, still has value.
And we were talking, you were just, looking at what's going on, whether it was the pandemic or whatever's happening economically right now, like that stuff is super important.
I agree.
Because once you've been removed from it, and that's lost. One thing, no, absolutely. So one thing I did, I thought, well, if the writing's on the wall, I'll at least do, LDS Mormon communities are really big about food storage and so forth. You guys are
right.
Jarring and all that stuff.
That's just
that was my childhood going to Utah.
Was it? Okay, yeah. So I bought a freeze dryer because I thought if we're getting 12 eggs a day and we only use 3 of them, I don't want them going to waste.
Right.
So I end up freeze drying every other week or so.
Amazing.
A bunch of racks of just egg. It turns into powder. And then you put it in the bags and you seal it and with an oxygen packet, and 1 tablespoon of powdered egg is equal to an egg. And so I just figured,
and you could sell that in LA for protein powders.
I was thinking
$20 a pound.
Yeah, let's do it.
Organic eggs. That'd be incredible.
I know. Anyway,
and what's wonderful is you're probably teaching your kids about it as well, and that's that's a big thing with me. My boy goes with me on a lot of the journeys. He harvested eggs in Park City. At this, he milked a goat. He
huge
went fishing for trout in Finland. And those are things that those are core memories that he still talks about, as if they happen.
Unlike your mom, who won't eat chicken, I think that's what you said earlier.
Well, now she won't eat pork.
Or pork, but didn't she have an experience with chickens when she was younger?
When she was a kid, so she stopped eating chickens after she had to chase after the.
I had a total different experience. I had my 2 boys that were 5 and 3 years old, and we had a neighbor who had 50 chickens, and she goes, "It's that time of the year to butcher them." Put them in the boiling water, pluck all the hair.
Did you guys join her?
And we joined her with my kids in that big shed. And these chickens were running all over, splattering all over and so forth. But we went through it. And I guess one of the things I had is raising, you got a young one, mine are a little bit older and so forth. I wanted to teach them at an early age a certain level of self-reliance, a certain level of getting your hands dirty is okay, that maybe eating a spoonful of dirt every day will have, maybe tongue in cheek, right? Will strengthen your immune system. That there's something to be said for all of this. And so I wanted to get my kids involved right away. And so was it weird probably at that age for them? Yeah. Were they damaged because of it?
Absolutely.
No.
A lot. I mean, all this, there's this sort of protection that's happened around kids. You have to protect them. You have to protect them at all costs. And so sometimes it's hard. My wife is an amazing mom and looks after our boy and now our girl, and very protective. And it's my job to say things that she thinks are dangerous. And I'm like, no, it's okay that he's digging in the dirt.
Totally.
It's just fine. And you know what? It's okay that he's going to walk down there and ring that door buzzer and talk to, we can stand here and watch him, but he's got to go and do that stuff.
I
right?
love that.
And he's got to get his hands dirty, like you said, and he's got to eat a spoonful of dirt, like whatever that is. Right.
Whatever that is.
It's a very strange thing to be arguing for, because the response that you get from, his grandmas, right. They're like, that's a terrible thing. Get him down off of that. And I'm like, he's okay. He's all right. He is, doing something dangerous, but carefully, right? Like that is an important thing.
Well, I interviewed Rich Karlgaard on my podcast a couple of years ago. He wrote a book called Late Bloomers. And one of the things he said, because of Carol Dweck from Stanford University, who wrote a book called Mindsets, he was quoting her and says, what she has found in her research lately is the kids today are brittle. And that always stuck with me, that I do think that doing hard things and exposing yourself like you've done with your book and with your TV show, like you said earlier on, I was constantly getting out of my comfort zone, kind of a thing. I think there's value to that. And then going to the next step, which is teach our kids that that's okay. Given that you're a guardrail, you want to protect them, but let them experience too.
Yep. And that's a hard thing that we have to take in, right?
Yeah.
Standing on the
because we've been there, done it, got the t-shirt. So we want to prevent them from getting hurt like we got hurt, but maybe getting hurt sometimes, if it's not deathly, is probably a good thing. Yeah.
One of the hardest things for me to do is stand on a playground while he's climbing up something really high with my hands like this and being okay with it, right? And the aftermath, because he'll learn something.
That's exactly right. The mind likes what's the same, but it learns from what is different. And if we don't allow difference to enter our reality through pain or whatever it is, then how are we really going to learn?
Yeah. And that, I was listening to somebody the other day who was talking about sort of the biology around eating vegetables. And that, people attribute the positives to vegetables for any number of things, the fiber, whatever it is, right? But he was arguing that it is the small doses of poison in the vegetables that the reason why you don't get cancer if you have a large vegetarian diet is because your body is constantly learning how to defend itself against these little poisons in these
Totally agree with that.
And that's like life, right? If you want to survive, if you want to thrive, you cannot live in a bubble. You cannot protect yourself. You need to go out there, chest out, and take the hits and learn how to, handle. It goes back to grit. It goes back to grit.
Totally goes back to grit.
I did at the start of the pandemic, I did a YouTube video. It's out there. And because YouTube doesn't allow the thumbs down to show you the number of thumbs down, I have this one video that has gotten a lot of heat. It's got equal.
You believe there's millions of thumbs down?
No, I can see on my end that it's about 50-50. There's a lot of thumbs up, but there's a lot of thumbs down. And the people that have their thumbs down and make comments, this was early on what all the comments were. TJ, have you ever studied terrain theory? Have you ever studied terrain? This is the first I've ever talked about. Have you ever studied? Because I've never responded to any of them. And so I went and I studied terrain theory. You know what terrain theory is?
What is terrain theory?
It's about some people will say there is no such thing as germs. Okay, now I'm not smart enough to know whether that's true or not true, but I'll get to the answer.
There's no such thing as germs.
There's a whole community out there that thinks there are really, that's what people will argue. So I'll get to terrain theory in 2 seconds, but the video was just about Ignaz Semmelweis, who back in 1840 realized he was the administrator over several hospitals and midwife centers, and noticed that people were dying all of a sudden, and like at a high number. So one night you woke up thinking, hey, maybe it's the knives and the things we're using on cadavers that's transferring particles from a dead person over to a new person. And so let's just clean with a lime solution. Let's clean the instruments. And all of a sudden,
the death stopped.
The death stopped. It went down to like 1%, from 13% down to 1%, and so forth. And my whole point was that, hey, wash your hands. Now, this was at the beginning of the pandemic, right? I was just trying to say, wash your hands.
Right.
It's just, that's all but people are like, don't you know that germs don't
You're
even
crazy.
exist?
Don't
You're
wash
crazy.
your hands.
You're crazy. So I ignored that, but it did make me go, because I'm teachable.
Right. You want to learn.
Discover what terrain theory is. And it's basically what you and I were just talking about, that our immune system is strong enough that
if you are healthy, if
you're healthy and you maintain a healthy vessel,
yep.
Then you can shield yourself from the different viruses and germs, if they exist, right? Whatever. And stuff that it's all their argument in the terrain theory is that you're a miracle, a walking miracle. If you'll just feed it properly, you'll give yourself what's necessary to fend off whatever is out there. And I thought, that's
look,
true.
I think there is truth in that. And there's also truth in the science that people have built up for the last, thousands of years. I
agree.
There's that both of those go hand in hand. And, during the pandemic, I have older parents, and we were deathly concerned of whether they were going to survive the pandemic.
In the beginning, keep it in mind, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was going on.
People were like wiping their mail down. Like, it was crazy, right?
Totally.
And I actually have a very funny story. So in this home show, Martha Stewart has agreed to be in the home show.
Oh, cool.
When it happens.
Yeah.
So she'll be sort of like my expert. Whenever I'm messing up and it's not working, I'll go to see Martha, and she'll be like, I'll go to Bedford, New York, and she'll be like, wipe your feet. Don't get dirt on the carpet.
Yeah, exactly.
Use a coaster, right? This is what you're doing wrong. And then she sends me back out. So Martha and I have been talking about this for a couple months. And this was in January. And then she said, look, I don't do deals unless I sit face to face with you.
Oh,
now it's now March 3rd, and COVID is really bubbling in the news. And she's like, I want you to come to New York and sit down with me. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to kill Martha Stewart. I'm going to bring COVID and she's going to die. And I was like, Martha, let's just do this. She's like, nope, I got to sit face to face. So on March 9th or March 8th, I fly to New York. And next morning, so my parents, I was like, I can't see you guys. They're like, don't worry, we won't hug. Of course, they don't listen to me or whatever.
That's what my mom said too. Yeah.
So then the next morning, I go to Martha's company. It's empty, right? It's just me and her in the conference room. She brought her Martha Stewart sweet potato fries. She's like sliding them down the length of the conference table. I'm eating them. We laugh, we joke. She's like, I'm in, and I leave. And now I'm in New York. Like, I have a day before my flight, and I'm like, what am I going to do? So I call a buddy. I'm like, do you want to get dinner? He's sure. So I'm at dinner with him at a restaurant, and I go down, use the bathroom. I'm checking my phone. Tom Hanks has COVID. The NBA shuts down. I'm like, I got to get out of New York. And then it was on. But Martha Stewart's still alive, everybody. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So,
wow, what an interesting 2 years. But
anyway,
getting back to the book. Go ahead. Yeah.
Both sides of it, right? You have
both sides of it.
The science behind it, and then also don't be too hermetically sealed off, because getting a little taste of dirt will help you in the long run.
Well, I just end on that point. I remember I had some guys over at my bungalow, and there's stairs that go up to the bungalow, and we were going to have a big kind of strategy meeting. We were going to be there for like 4 hours, and halfway through I said, hey, we don't need a lot of frozen pizza or anything, but I happened to see some on sale. So I put them in my freezer. Do you guys want some pizza? And they're like, heck yeah, go do it. So I went and threw them in the oven, came out to the bungalow with the pizza on the racks. And these gentlemen that were with me were in their 60s or whatever. And I'm walking up the stairs with my flip-flops, and I trip and I lean forward, and a bunch of the pizza, not all of it, but a bunch of it went on all over the steps up to the bungalow. Immediately, these guys come out of the bungalow and they're like, "Oh no, here, we'll help pick it up." And they help pick it up. And I go, "Guys, I am really sorry that I just destroyed all this pizza." And Tim, one of these guys, Tim goes, "You kidding me? This isn't going to hurt anybody. Let's eat this." And you know what? They ate
count to five. Count to five.
Count to five. They ate all that pizza. A little bit of dirt isn't going to hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been great. I tell you. So this is what I end in the book with. In the afterward, you say Kenya has lost 70% of its wildlife since 1990. Sounds like a similar statistic in the South China Sea that you talked about.
Yep.
You say, "My dad, who has diabetes, I was happy to learn that if you cook potatoes or rice and cool them overnight, they don't cause glucose spikes." I didn't know that.
Yeah. And if you add a coconut oil in there, it's even better. Yeah. So cooking it, the reheated after cooling overnight, I think it's by half. It cuts the sugar out.
The things we can learn. I just think I am the benefactor of being able to interview people like you on the Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast, that I feel like I need to do a video, just a quick little video of a thank you to all you guys and ladies and so forth that come onto the podcast and teach me. I feel like I'm sitting at the feet of experts, and you've said over and over, you're not the expert, but in a way you kind of are. You're the one putting it forward to help the rest of us see how we can do just a little bit better
for this particular journey, right? Not many people do this particular journey. So in that sense, yes.
Yeah.
For 5 years, I've done food production, harvesting, hunting, fishing, and foraging around the world. And so in that particular, it's field research in a way. And I've gotten to sit at the feet of incredible experts. But what you do is amazing. Like, I think being able to sort of curate, you get to sit down. It's almost like getting a PhD, you get to sit there one-on-one with experts and then curate, ask just the questions to lead, to deeper understanding on this. What a job.
And my hope is always that I ask the right questions, right? Sometimes I get off and go, "Oh, I should have asked that," or "I should have asked that." But you know what? I'm learning a lot in the meantime, and I'm just humbled. Wow, we've gone a long time. I didn't mean to take we'll probably have to do a part one and a part two. That's probably the best way to do it. Wow, it has been a pleasure.
This was fun
to have you on the show. And I feel like I learned a lot from reading your book. I felt a lot of heart in your book, the message that you have. I think the purpose by which motivates you to get out and share this message. I feel like you're balanced in your approach, right? Like you said in the beginning, I'm not telling people not to eat meat. I'm just being more mindful of the meat that you do eat, right? And I think that's a healthy approach, just to be balanced in your approach.
Because then you can make your own decisions. People will read the book and hopefully they'll continue, investigating, because there's only so much I can write in that book, right? There's the world of food is so people. I work with vegans. I work with vegetarians on my crew, and they have their own. I discuss a little bit about it in the book, and they have their own journey that they learned. They vehemently, think if you're not going to kill your own animal, then you should not eat meat. That was what they came away, with it. So I think everybody can take that this could be a good jumping off point for more conversation around it. And I just read a really cool article in Bon Appetit yesterday about a woman who sort of went through a similar thing. She went on a hunting experience, and it's great that these conversations are starting to happen.
I agree. Totally. You're a good vessel to do it, good messenger. So thank you. Remind everybody, what's the best website to go to that will get them to the different
discoverfromscratch.com.
Discoverfromscratch.com. Okay, we'll put it here. We'll put it in the link down below.
Beautiful. You can check out the show on there. You can read the first chapter of the book is on there, and little gifts and stuff people can get as well. Fun stuff.
Yeah. Anything else you want to close with today?
No, this was fun. I'm empty. My brain is empty. That's it.
my brain is empty, but my heart is full.
Yeah, I love it.
Anyway,
it was lovely meeting you, man.
It was nice meeting you too. Thanks for being on the Greatness Within podcast.
My pleasure.